African Union is now a member of the G20, a landmark step towards economic development for the continent. And in Nigeria, the African Development Bank is taking a step further in advancing the second phase of the special agro-industrial processing zones in 20 additional states. I am Charles Alpha, welcoming you to this week's edition of Africa Weekly. Now, the African Union became the second regional grouping to be admitted to the group of G20 leading industrialized and developing nations as a full permanent member. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi announced Saturday the start of the G20 Leaders Summit in New Delhi.
सबका साथ की भावना से ही भारत ने
The widely anticipated move underscores India's wide-ranging agenda to elevate the global multilateral forum's focus on the Global South in its presidency of the G20 this year. The 55-member bloc of African nations joins the European Union as only the second regional organization to become a permanent member of the G20. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi said in his opening remarks that India's G20 presidency has become a symbol of inclusion, both within the country and beyond, representing the spirit of Sabka Saath, referring to a spirit of togetherness. It was in the spirit of Sabka Saath that India proposed permanent membership of the African Union in the G20, he added. With an embrace after the announcement, Modi welcomed AU chairperson Azali Assoumani and offered him a place at the conference table for permanent members of the G20. The AU chair is rotated annually among the continent's 5 regions. Assoumani is the president of the Comoros, an archipelago off the east coast of Africa. Meanwhile, Charles Michel, President of the European Council, said that he is delighted the African Union was granted full membership in the G20. He added that EU has been a steadfast supporter of this initiative.
We are extremely positive because you know that from the very beginning we decided to support this decision to apply to become a G20 member. This is an important signal of inclusivity, and we need to bring the African continent together with the EU to address all the collective challenges. I think that this decision, the African Union in the G20, is a major step for the G20, for Africa, but it's not the last step. I have the impression that in the future it will be needed to work to make the world fairer, and it means more inclusive. I'm absolutely convinced that by bringing the African Union around the table, first, it will also encourage the African Union to try to converge politically.
And he is pleased to have championed it from the very beginning with Macky Sall. Sall is Senegal's president and was the 2022 chair of the African Union.
Still on the recent held G20 summit, President Bola Tinubu has expressed Nigeria's commitment and readiness to play a major role within the G20 and contribute to shaping a more equitable world. President Bola Tinubu addressed the group of leaders in New Delhi, India, as a special invitee.
Nigeria, again, is among nations to be counted as leaders converge on New Delhi. There is a new face on the block, and perhaps a special guest who may soon join another league of leaders who cut the shots in the world. For now, the immediate possibility here is an end to the long wait as the African Union finally finds a permanent seat in the group. Now, a group of 20 plus 1 to reinforce the search for solutions to the long-standing challenges of development, economic resilience, financial stability, food and energy security, among others.
Friends, after the COVID-19 pandemic, the world is now going through a major crisis, and that is a lack of trust. War has further deepened this trust deficit.
The special guest would lend a voice as he suggests stronger collaboration, cooperation, and partnerships among diverse regions are the pathways to a peaceful, prosperous, and sustainable future for the world. Expressing the willingness of Nigeria to contribute to the solution drive, President Tinubu believes that oneness must be truly demonstrated in the character of a group. And soon after, the G20 New Delhi Leaders Declaration emerges, suggesting new approaches to the global challenges.
The declaration that the leaders have agreed on today focuses on promoting strong, sustainable, balanced, and inclusive growth. It seeks to accelerate progress on SDGs and has come up with an action plan accordingly.
Time for some bilateral talks on the sidelines, which involved leaders from Germany, Egypt, among other countries' representatives. Pleasant expressions afterwards, perhaps a signal to positive possibilities of some great deals to come. Then, a stop at an exhibition center as Ashiwaju looks on with a gaze that suggests familiarity.
Now, Africa must position itself for a climate change through appropriate legislations in order to avail itself of major opportunities to mitigate its impacts on the continent. Now, this is coming from the Director General, National Institute for Legislative and Democratic Studies, Professor Abubakar Suleiman, in his keynote address at the 2023 African Climate Summit in Nairobi, organized by the African Union and governments of Kenya.
Climate change is acknowledged to have contributed to the worsening livelihood and political instability in Africa and its sub-regions, necessitating the importance to scale up progress in climate change legislations. Professor Suleiman, looking at the perspective of national climate change legislation in West Africa, noted that despite the Paris Agreement on net zero emission by 2050, the needed domestication of the agreement through legislations to access funds has been low. In Africa, he said, only Nigeria, Uganda, and Kenya have passed the climate change legislation, with only Nigeria in the West African sub-region.
These are events, therefore, offer stakeholders the opportunity to share their perspectives on how to enhance climate change legislation and implementations in Africa.
He therefore called on the Africa Group of Negotiators, Expert Supporters, AGNES, and the National Council of Climate Change, NCCC, to develop an adoptable climate change legislation that African countries would use to craft their legislations.
Through the experience sharing that this side event offers, we can all learn from other countries and discuss ways by which Parliament could be strengthened to mainstream climate change through the passage of climate change legislation in their various countries.
Building capacities of parliamentarians to actively participate in climate change negotiations and other continental and global climate change events was also advocated.
Modalities for the commencement of the second phase of the Special Agro-Industrial Processing Zones program in Nigeria has commenced with a workshop for key stakeholders by the African Development Bank in Abuja. The program is set to cover additional 20 states in Nigeria. Now, our next conversation is with the National Coordinator, Dr. Kabir Yusuf, and here now is an excerpt.
Phase 2 Inception Workshop specifically is to onboard 20 more states which were already in the run at the first phase. During the design of SAPZ, all states were provided with some certain level of criteria to come up, which include providing their environmental and social impact assessments, their feasibility studies that takes into consideration value chains and the business case for that value chain. As I've noted earlier in the inception workshop and also when we met the last time, it's a government-enabled and private sector-led project. So the government has designed the project in such a way that it supports private sector participation and private sector investment. So it is now key for each state to not only just identify the key value chains they want to promote, but also identify the value proposition in terms of business for all these value chains. So which is why part of the criteria for each state is to come up with their feasibility studies that takes into consideration designated sites for aggregation ATCs, which means where the agrarians are, where we need to promote farming, improve food security, and at the same time the other designated infrastructure that's usually close to the ATCs, which we call our industrial hubs, where we're going to promote processing and all that. So these are what we expect from the states as a first criteria to come in. So during the first phase, we requested that, so we had to take as a first come, first served basis to ensure that we put on ground this laudable initiative by government. So we took in 8 states, and since then other states have been expressing interest, which is why we had this inception workshop to go through the criteria. You're aware that we have now new governments, new governors that might previously perhaps not be aware of even what SAPZ is or perhaps the criteria. So I think it is very laudable that the governors are very willing to provide this kind of what do you call it? I think it is very good that at least these governors are very willing to provide such transformation in their various cities. Once they saw the concept, they fell in love with it. And they know that the government means business. And importantly, this new government has reiterated so many times that it's a dawn of a new era and Nigeria is open for business. I remember the VP made that declaration when we were in Rome, also to promote investment for SAPs, that Nigeria is open for business.
Okay, so now how would you now view the impact of the AFDB on this program?
Well, I think very good. The ADB has taken leadership on the development partner side on this initiative. They've been able at first in the beginning to galvanize enough funds for the first phase, and they've equally taken leadership on the development partner side to ensure that we bring phase 2 to life. I think being part of this workshop was also a very good initiative from them. But overall, I think it's good we make some few things clear and understandable. Special Agro-Industrial Processing Zone Program is a Nigerian government, federal government, and state government project. It's owned by the country. It's supported by development partners such as ADB, but is led and supported first by the country. So we have development partners like the ADB that has taken the leadership on the development partner side to support the government of Nigeria actualize this initiative. But this is a concept of the Federal Republic of Nigeria to ensure that it boosts food security, it domesticates export, reduce capital flight of forex, and importantly, transform rural communities into secondary cities by bringing in infrastructure, supportive infrastructure to the rural communities, changing the lives of farmers, and also equally changing the lives of citizens of this country.
I would like to ask, what is the next step towards onboarding the new states into the SAPZ?
So we have received a couple of expressions of interest from states. Some of them that already have done their feasibility studies and environmental and social impact assessment have already provided that. Those that haven't have made pledge in their expression of interest that they would provide, and we're still waiting to collate that. And after that, we will now go led by our principals, the Federal Minister of Agriculture, to galvanize enough funding to cater for the states, which we did tell the states that it's on a criteria base. So we look at the states that are most ready, that have shown the most commitments, and then the funds will now be allocated to the states depending on the readiness criteria, which importantly will be the value chains they have promoted and the viability of those value chains in business terms.
Okay, now, so if you look at the takeoff of the phase two, what are your expectations from this phase?
I think they're positive because the enthusiasm from government first and then down to the governors is a lot. Our minister was there. Our minister made very, very strong declarations. He charged the development partners to galvanize funds, to take in twice or even more states on board. And he also told them, including the states, that his doors are open and strategically open for investors, for partners, and even for states to ensure that each state in this country benefits from this laudable initiative. And he did charge us, his staff. As you know, we're under the Ministry of Agriculture and Food Security. He discharged us to ensure that we not only leave our doors strategically open, but we ensure that we deliver this project specifically for food security, to ensure food security in this country. The ADB has taken leadership on the development partner side on this initiative. They've been able at first, in the beginning, to galvanize enough funds for the first phase, and they've equally taken leadership on the development partner side to ensure that we bring phase two to life. I think being part of this workshop was also a very good initiative from them. But overall, I think it's good we make some few things clear and understandable. Special Agro-Industrial Processing Zone Program is a Nigerian government, federal government, and state government project. It's owned by the country. It's supported by development partners such as ADB, but is led and supported first by the country. So we have development partners like the ADB that has taken the leadership on the development partner side to support the government of Nigeria actualize this initiative. But this is a concept of the Federal Republic of Nigeria to ensure that it boosts food security, it domesticates export, reduce capital flight of forex, and importantly, transform rural communities into secondary cities by bringing in infrastructure, supportive infrastructure to the rural communities, changing the lives of farmers, and also equally changing the lives of citizens of this country.
Gabon's former president, Ali Bongo, is free to leave the country and travel abroad. General Brice Oligui Nguema, leader of the coup that toppled President Bongo, stated this in a statement which was read on the state television.
Chef du gouvernement de la
Gabon's military ruler appointed Raymond Ndongsima, a permanent opponent to ousted President Ali Bongo Ondimba, as interim prime minister following the country's coup on August 30th. Ndongsima, a 68-year-old economist, served as prime minister under Bongo from 2012 to 2024 before becoming a critic and eventually challenging him in elections in 2016 and 2023. His appointment was made in a decree by the new strongman, General Nguema, who was sworn in as interim president on Monday after the coup. In the meantime, General Nguema said in a statement read on state television that the ousted president has freedom of movement and can travel abroad if he wishes. The Committee of Transition and Restoration of Institution reaffirms that given his state of health, the former president is free to travel for medical checks. Bongo suffered a serious stroke in October 2018, which left him physically impaired, with particular difficulty moving his right leg and arm. Bongo took office in 2009, succeeding his father Omar, who ruled the country for 41 years. Ali Bongo's family held swaying power over Gabon for close to 60 years. Bongo has been under house arrest since the military coup of August 30th, less than an hour after his party proclaimed his re-election in a vote described as fraudulent by the opposition and most observers.
That's our package this week. Thanks for being part of it. I am Charles Alpha. Thanks for watching.